something first.
All right. Would you mind telling us your name and your parents' name?
My name is Patricia Miller, and I was born to James and Vivian Jackson in May 1st, 1935 in Somerville, Georgia. And I was the only child, and we moved to Aragon, and we lived over close to Paul Wolf's store to start with. Then we moved into the village. Mom and Daddy both worked at the mill. And Daddy went in service when the war broke out. I don't remember too much about the war. I was old enough to, but it seemed like things that are horrible to you, you can just block out of your mind. And after Daddy come home, well, while Daddy was in service, we lived down on Elm Street in the house of Mr. and Miss Kate Rogers. And didn't have running water in the house. And we had a faucet out between the houses, the two houses. We'd have to go bring in the water. Didn't have bathrooms in the house either. Then after the war, they come along and put inside plumbing in all these houses. And then I think it was probably in the 40s, the mill company sold these houses to people. And they started making them into one family houses. I don't know how. Some of the people with 5 or 6 kids lived in 3 and 4 rooms. But anyway, I went to school in Aragon School through the 9th grade. And about all we had to do was we'd get out and play in the street. And now, people respected the kids. They could get out and play safely. You didn't have to worry about it. And nobody locked their doors. Didn't have air conditioning. But, we made it fine. Everybody was poor, but we didn't know it. Because everybody else was poor. And I didn't want to go to Rockmart School. So, I said I was going to quit. Daddy said, no, you're not. So I went to Berry. And 1 year, then I come back to Rockmart. I didn't like being away from home. I was homesick. But I liked Berry. And her principles are not being carried out like there was when I was up there. You worked 2 days, you went to school 4 days, and you went to church on Sunday. And one thing you learned was how to work. And then after I was long about the time I was in 8th, 9th grade up here, we used to play it out under the street light at night sometime. Just a bunch of us kids gather up, and about the Gene Kellett and Middle Wayne Elders. Oh, I can't remember who all, but anyway, most of them passed on. The only one that I know is still living is Billy Weaver, lives in Rockport. And I graduated from Rockmore High School. Then I went to Atlanta and worked for about, just a little while, and I met Al. And we moved to Ohio for about 6 months, and then we came back here. And we've lived here since, well, really all my life, right?
How did you meet Al?
We were just riding around, and him and a buddy of his was walking along, and they flagged us down. We stopped and talked to him, and he got my phone number. And for, several months, he called me about every day, and then finally he asked me for a date. But we felt like we had known each other because we'd said everything could be said. And we got married, went to Ohio, come back here. And our first place we lived was in the house of Miss Kate Rogers. And in '56, we had a set of twins, and they didn't make it. And another person that was great in my life growing up here was Miss Jane Bishop. She was Henrietta's Gurley's aunt. She lived out on Pine Street, and I guess most of her folks are dead. But Mary Brinkley was one of my very best friends. And we used to gather up at the ball field, and everybody brought their kids, and they played in the dirt while we watched the ball game, but we didn't do too much watching. We were sitting talking. But everybody was friendly. And you cared about your neighbors. Then we moved up on the other end of Elm Street. There was Barbara Bishop, Sarah Barber, Pearl Brumlow, Daisy Hardy, and Jill Lakins. We used to gather after supper, sat and talked in the summertime. I went to work in '74. I started the first nutrition center in Polk County. And I didn't get to work very long because I was in a car wreck. But I loved those old people and the tales they could tell. And I hope that our children kind of listen to their elders, because I really learned a whole lot. And when I was in that car wreck for a year or so, they visited me, and one of them come home and stayed for 3 months and took care of my kids and me. And people just loved one another back then. I was raised in the Baptist church, but when I married Al, he was Methodist, and he wouldn't go with me, so I went with him, and I've never regretted it. But the Fords were real active in church. Harry Ford and his uncle used to live at the other side of the house with us, and he was a big songwriter. And one of the songs that you might remember that he wrote was come home, it's supper time. And Harry, his grandpa, used to come here and give singing lessons, he called it. And all the kids around would go. And
I believe they used to do that over in Alabama where I grew up. They would have singing school at the churches.
yeah. And, we loved to sing back then. Had quartets. I never could sing. Miss Ford give piano lessons, and boy, she could make that piano dance. Harry's mama. But she used to say I was tone deaf. I couldn't play the piano and couldn't sing. But I like to listen to it. And I still like it. When we moved here, and for years, we didn't have no grass in the yard. Everybody swept their yards with the yard broom. And kept the trash out of the yards, but we didn't have no lawnmowers and grass.
I remember when I was growing up, everybody had a spot of bare dirt right in front of their steps. We didn't cut grass, or we didn't cut it like we do now. And they would, like you said, they would keep the area there clean where there wouldn't be any weeds or anything right there at their doorstep.
Mm-hmm. Well, people didn't have, I guess they didn't have time, but it seemed like they had more time then than they do now. Now people say they don't have time to visit. But as people started moving out and working in different places from the mill down here, they didn't have as much time, because instead of 8 hours, it was 10 hours more than likely to go back and forth. Some of them more than that.
Well, when you're driving, you got 8 hours of work, and then whatever the commute time, you double that. So
Yeah.
10, 12 hours a day, most likely.
When we first moved up here in this house, this is where Henrietta Gurley was talking about that they lived. And we bought a house. And Al worked about 18 months remodeling. And the boys done what they could. But all I could do was take the crowbar and tear out whatever I wanted to. I couldn't nail the nail, but I could sure tear it out. And Mary and Joe Reynolds lived next door. And behind us was Gladys Pittman, Larry's mama. And then Miss Lumpkin lived next door to her. And Miss Moore lived across the street. Mom and Daddy. And in the later years, one of the best neighbors that we ever had was Lynn and Homer Walker. They were real good neighbors. But another thing that Al used to love Halloween, and he'd sit on the porch and give out candy. He'd be waiting for the first trick-or-treaters to come. And a lot of them now, until he was not able the last 2 years to do it, but a lot of them were the grandkids of the kids that he started giving candy to. And, you know, they still don't worry as much about kids here as they but when I was growing up, you didn't even think about nobody harming nobody. And
you know that it seems like you never did hear anything about something like that happening until sometime in the late '60s.
Yeah.
To me, before that, never even thought about it.
Yeah. But you know, most of them was raised here, and we used to, if we heard of somebody died, well, where we know them real well or not, we went in the kitchen and started cooking, taking in, and back then they brought the corpse home and set up with them. Of course, I don't think that's a good idea now, but that's just the way it was back then.
We used to do that.
But people don't care about people like they used to. They're all thinking about how much money they can make, and we all need money, but that's not the most important thing in the world.
That's right. Well, I appreciate you telling your story, and I'll come back again, and you can gather up your thoughts and tell us some more.
Okay.
Well, thank you very much.